In this week's short demonstration, thought I'd give you an insight as to how I place figures. It's something I get asked a lot for, is how do I place my figures in my scenes. I think the first thing really is to get yourself familiar with just painting figures. Take a piece of scrap paper and just fill it with figures. If you can, find some time to practice the figures on just scraps of paper. It's essential to get an idea of the basic characteristics of the human form, even though, as mostly landscape artists, cityscape artists that we are, painters I should say, for the most part we're really not, there's no real need to go into human anatomy in any real detail unless you choose to do so, which can be extremely helpful, of course. There's no such thing as too much knowledge, but as I say, for the most part we really need to just learn it's almost a symbol, it's the basic symbols of the human figure. So one of the big affecting factors, if you like, is the scale. It's, you know, if I just go to the top of this paper, if you're dealing with a scene, it's all about distance and proximity. Distance, proximity, scale. So you've got to match the scale to the proximity. In other words, if you've got a little house, I'll show you more in this other demonstration in a moment. You've got to be able to place that figure so that it's the correct scale for the proximity, how far it is away from you, the viewer, because that's what it always comes down to, and how far that little figure might be to its nearest object, whether that object be a building, a car, or just other figures. This all comes into play. And I'll talk very much about the eye line, which is essential when you're putting figures in your paintings, when I show you the next part of this. So scrap paper, piece of scrap paper. Start with the most basic. One of the most common mistakes people make is they put in a huge head, and we've probably all done this, all guilty of it. I know I was when I started out. So the head is almost Martian-like, you know, they look like they've just visited from another planet. The interesting thing is, you can make a head too small and it'll look fantastic, look great, no problem at all. Too small a head, go even smaller than that, same size body, it'll never look as ridiculous as the head that's too big. So that's the first thing I would recommend that you practice, is just getting the ratio of just the size of the head to the torso, and then to the lower part of the body, the legs, around the hip area and the legs. And what I was doing for ages was literally a three-shape exercise. The head, the upper torso, something for the around the waist and around the hips, around there, and then of course the legs, two separate sort of lines in this case. So I'm dealing with figures here of about 1.25 inches in measurement, so that might be quite suitable for this is a 15 by 11 piece of paper. This would be adequate for figures in the mid-ground of a scene, something like that. But beyond that is the proximity. So that we're talking about proximity here in terms of where they stand in the mix of your scene. Beyond that, of course, figures will get much smaller. The further, just like everything else, the further an object is away, the smaller they get, until you get to a point where it's no more than a little lozenge shape of the brush, and those could be figures on, you know, at a real distance. But what happens then when we come forward? this becomes a slightly more difficult thing to master, simply because you've got to add more detail. So you're increasing the size. I keep the same pattern: the head, the torso, the hip area, as though this is a skirt or shorts that this person is wearing. And then at this point, you're still okay. Just, you just block this out with a coloured garment, something like that, and sometimes just a coloured neutral. You're doing a blue-grey colour in here. But when we get to this sort of scale in our paintings, we're looking at 2 inches here, about. We have to start thinking about offering the viewer a little bit more detail, and it might come in the form of just saying, well, this character's wearing an open garment, okay? And if they're facing us, then there could be it could be that they're revealing an open shirt, open neck shirt, something like this, or blouse or whatever. So you have to start embellishing as soon as you get to this sort of scale. When you get any bigger than that, of course, if the head suddenly becomes this big, the head now is almost as big as these torsos. As soon as the head gets to ½ an inch, we have to infer at least some hint of features. Usually for this scale, I would probably just dot in eyes. Wouldn't put the nose in, wouldn't put the mouth in, just the eyes. You might also want to hint upon the darker shapes on the side of the head, which could suggest ears or just hair at this side, at the sides of the head. Be careful putting hair over the top of the head. It can work, but there's a lot of light hitting figures on the tops of people's heads most of the time, so it's more important perhaps to hint upon something either side of the head. Now remember the scale, okay? Whatever you do now, don't start putting in a torso that's only as big as this one here. This is, I mean, the scale is something like 7.5 times the head size. So, you've got one to the feet, that is, from top of head to the feet. So you've got a head size of that. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you'd expect their feet to be down here, something like this. And then, once again, you need to embellish. You need to sort of say, well, this person's wearing a coat. They may be squarer in the shoulder if they're wearing a coat. They may have a little neck area revealed here. You may even have a separation of shapes at the top of trousers or skirt or whatever. So, as I say, as soon as you get past the 1 inch, 1.25 inch into the 2 inch and beyond, it calls for some hint of more than just the basic shape like this. It's only really, and I don't find I use this, I can't remember the last time I used a figure bigger than this in any of my paintings, but if you were to go beyond this size, then you've really got to start thinking about the eyes, hint of a nose maybe, and maybe a hint of a mouth. Certainly the sides of the head need indicating. Be careful with the indication of hair or a hat. All these things. You've got to get the scale right. Now then, so far, the head is about here. So far I've dealt with figures facing us. Okay. These figures assume they're facing us like this. I won't completely, I think you got the message with this one. But what about figures that are turning away from us or walking from side to side, walking from left to right or right to left? Now then, let's deal with the opposite of this, and this is a figure walking away from us. The first thing to remember is that same shape more or less as this, okay, but far less of the head is shown in most cases. I mean, people come in all shapes and sizes, endomorphs and the others, which I can't remember the names of them all. But the first thing you must that indicates a person walking away from us is by reducing the depth of the head by half. So it becomes even smaller on figures that are walking away from us. Okay, so just give them a carrier bag or something like this. So that's an easy one to. It's an important one to remember. You can't have. It might look a little bit awkward or weird sometimes if all your figures are walking towards you, or vice versa, they're all walking away from you. So you need to get these two things organised in your paintings. This person's walking towards me, like this. Okay, open jacket. That's another indication of somebody walking towards you. It's an open jacket. The neck comes down into the front of the body. No evidence of that, of course, with the figure that's walking away from you. It's just the back of the head, top of the back of the head only. So you're only seeing that much of the head of the person that's walking towards you. So, as I say, I always refer to these as symbols. Everything has a symbol, and it's your job to work that symbol out, to find the symbol. So let's now look at figures walking from one side to the other. And here's the most important thing in that respect. So let's put an imaginary ground line in here for a moment. It's not very straight, I know, but I think I'll be able to get the point across. Let's turn it flat. Right, there's a curvature in the body. Now, what I would say is this: when somebody's let's have this person walking in this direction from right to left. Okay, the first thing to note is that the head is slightly in front of the torso in most cases. It's a fairly active walk, you know, fairly brisk walk. Maybe the leading leg is out here, the trailing leg is back there. That person's, you know, they're not dilly-dallying, they're on a mission to get somewhere. So that's the important thing to remember, because again, I used to do this myself. I'd probably just have, I wouldn't even know how to portray somebody walking in motion, in action. I'd always put the head directly on top of the shoulders like this, and then I would struggle to sort of have them looking like they're moving. Get a reasonable degree of movement in there like this, but it's the head, position of the head is really, really important. Or, you know, to do the opposite, of course, somebody walking in this direction, you reverse it. Head is always just leading like this. There's often a straightness to the front of the body here with the curvature of the back like this, and then that leading leg and a trailing leg that way. If you look at how simple that is, it's just like it's just a really simple form. This is like an elongated bell shape, if you like, with a flat side and a curvature to the back. Head forward. You could have the arms out, arm back here. They're really sort of, perhaps they're late for their train or whatever. I mean, this is just a basic lesson in figure drawing. As soon as you get into figures in action, these could be, you know, people playing sports, whatever. You know, there are some different dynamics again to be dealt with, but for us, most of the time, we're dealing with these three things. So it's, just to recap, it's scale and proximity. And this scale and proximity will make more sense when I show you the next part, which we will do next week. So just to recap, as I say, scale and proximity, head size, that's so important, and it's the most common mistake people make, is to make the head way too big. And sometimes if you do it deliberately, you realise how ridiculous it can look. You know, it's just, but it does. Trust me, it doesn't take much to make the head look too big. Err on the smaller sides, always better. Then we've got the scale. So as soon as we go beyond this sort of inch and a quarter, we've got to start thinking about indicating garments and which way they're facing, whether they're walking towards us or walking away from us. And beyond that, as I say, I don't very often use figures this big in my paintings, but you may be doing something different, in which case you're going to have to really study a bit more of the human shape if you're going beyond this sort of scale in your paintings. And then so remember the person walking away from us, half the head, because the shoulders generally will hide this part of the head and face. And then figures in movement, left to right or right to left. You can practice these. People will be in all sorts of different sort of captured in all different sort of stances and movements when they're walking briskly. But that's the thing to remember, is that head line there. It's in front of the body at that, not in line with the leg at this one, always in front of the body. If you've got two people stood side by side, of course, talking, perhaps in the middle of a street, having a chat, then that's different again. You'll find that there's always a little bit of curvature over the back of the shoulders most of the time, depending on what sort of garments they're wearing. And then you'll just have a static, sort of more or less static shape with very little dynamic. They're shaking hands or something like this. But yeah, these are the ones you need to be really giving some consideration for. So once again, folks, I hope that helps. Run out of time now to put these into a scene scenario, but we'll be dealing with that at the next video. Hope you've enjoyed this one. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps and enables me to continue uploading these little tutorials and demonstrations. If you want immediate notification, you need to hit the little bell icon and you will get, as I say, immediate notification as and when I upload each new video. Better still, on top of that, as well as that, please, if you could, hit the share or share these with friends and colleagues. Maybe you've got a local art society. I'd really appreciate it if you would share my videos around, as I say, it helps just to secure future videos. In the meantime, good luck, happy painting, see you at the next one.